Flosstube friends, thank you so much for joining me for another video. If you are new to my channel, welcome. My name is Audrey Marine and this is a channel all about cross stitch. If you are not new to my channel, thank you so much for returning, and you probably know the drill. So today is going to be a stitch with me video, and in this case I'm going to be covering satin stitches. If you are unfamiliar with the format of my channel, I do release regular Flosstube videos every few weeks, and I cover starts, whips, finishes, all the regular stuff that you might see on Flosstube. But in between those regular Flosstube episodes, I release Stitch With Me videos that cover either just regular stitching, stitch and chat sort of videos, or they may cover particular specialty stitches. And that's what we're going to be doing today. We're going to be tackling the satin stitch. Satin stitches appear in not just samplers, but a lot of other pieces. And it's not something that you should shy away from. It's not any more technically difficult than cross stitch over two, and I know you're all doing that. So let's go ahead and dive in. This is Margaret Anderson, 1830. This is a Hands Across the Sea samplers chart. Unfortunately, a paper copy is no longer available. If you want the paper chart, you're going to have to look to the secondary market. This is a booklet that was given to attendees of a particular workshop a few years ago. You can, however, get the PDF on the Hands Across the Sea Samplers website, and I will link that below. Margaret Anderson is a great learning tool, though, because not only does she have cross stitch over two and satin stitch, but she also features queen stitches, which I have started here and shown in another previously recorded Stitch With Me video. I will link that below. She also has cross stitch over one, and there is some couching as well. So I will go ahead and show you the top left corner of this chart. This is where I started. Now you're probably thinking this is the bottom right corner, but in fact it's the top left. I just have the piece flipped so that it's upside down. I figured that would be easier for me to access that area. So what we're going to be working on today is this section here. I've already put in some satin stitches, and as I say, I put in 4 queen stitches that I demonstrated on another video. Also this morning, I put in a little bit of this inner border that is cross stitch over two, and I outlined this section of satin stitch. This satin stitch makes up a band, this band here that goes all the way across the top of this piece. But I wanted to show you this part in particular because you need to see how at least Hands Across the Sea samplers charts satin stitches. I have seen satin stitches on other designers' charts, and it's charted the same way with these just straight lines. In this case, we have vertical lines as well as horizontal lines, and you'll see that on the piece here. Now, I have everything set up here in my Hardwick Manor hoop, which is held in my Velky Pataki stand. I will link information on the products that I use in this video down below in the information box. But if you're interested specifically in needlework tools, I did record a couple weeks ago a video all about needlework tools. I will link that below as well if you haven't caught it. And if you are interested, I would also take a look at the comment section of that video because a lot of viewers stopped to give their own suggestions of needlework tools that I did not mention. And it's proven to be very interesting, at least to me. All right, so satin stitching, there are a couple things to kind of keep in mind when you're going forth into satin stitching. First of all, you want to make sure that your tension is going to be even. If you are someone who loves to stitch in hand, you do it regularly, it's just something to keep in mind, that you have to constantly be aware of your tension. If you are stitching in hand and your tension is too tight when putting in satin stitches, your fabric's going to bunch, and you may have bunching in some areas and not in others, and you have to be aware that when that piece finally gets stretched into a framed finish or a small pillow, a stand-up, whatever it may be, you want to know that all of your satin stitches are going to be, they're going to look the same, and you're not going to have any bunching or loose threads or overly tight threads in area that would pull on the linen. So that's one thing to keep in mind. Another thing to keep in mind is that when you are laying down the satin stitches, you want to move in a way that is perhaps counterintuitive, but will ensure more parallel lines. It will ensure that your stitches are even as they are put down. So I'm going to go ahead and get us started here. I've already put some in as well, and I'll talk more about it as we get through it. But first, I'm just going to put down a little tail, or I should say leave out a tail. And you might be wondering why I am starting in an area that I have already stitched. This area, stretching this diagonal up here and up to here, this is one layer of satin stitches. This area over here, however, is 2 layers of satin stitches. I hope you can see on the video that this area with 2 layers is a bit more thickly covered. You can't see as much of the fabric poking through, if any, but here, where there is just one pass of satin stitches, you can see gaps between the stitches. I am using, for the satin stitches, I'm using Soie d'Alger. It is a skein silk. It comes in little skeins like this, and you can see there, Soie d'Alger. And the reason that I am using Soie d'Alger is because I want, on this effectively 42 count, very fat, fluffy stitches. I have used Soie 100.3 for the queen stitches as well as the cross stitch over 2. My favorite combination, and the combination that gives me what I think is the most agreeable coverage, is 100.3 silks and 46 count linen from Zweigart, or 100.3 silks and 45 count linen from Legacy Linens. Now, this is what I say a 42 count. It is a 40 count, but in the overdying process seems to have shrunk a little bit. So when I counted it out to ensure that it was a 40 count, I found that it was actually kind of a 42 count. I chose this piece of fabric for this project though, because I liked the color. And I thought that using a piece of 42 count with 103s, at least for the queen stitches, would allow for some distinction in these legs here, these queen stitches. And I do have very nicely defined queen stitches. I can see each individual little stitch, and I like that. I was slightly concerned that the cross stitch over 2 wouldn't have adequate coverage with the 100.3s on this 42 count, but I am satisfied that the coverage is fine. So we're moving forward with that. Now, I am using Soie d'Alger, as I said, because I want big, fat, fluffy satin stitches on this. And I don't believe that with 2 stitches of Soie 100.3 on this fabric that I would get the kind of coverage that I want. And the reason that I believe that is because I have a little bit of experience with satin stitches, and I'll show you a couple examples. Now, this is an animal cracker from Stacy Nash. This is Henny Penny, and I deviated from the chart. I used none of the called for colors, and I gave her a really funky apron. And I talk more about this in Flosstube episode number 41. But here you will see what looks like a log cabin quilt block, and I use satin stitches to achieve this. 2 passes of satin stitches laid diagonally with cotton floss on 40 count linen. And that's what it looks like. Very thick, very shiny. And I just love how that looks. The other example I have to show you is Marianne Groom by Hands Across the Sea Samplers. I stitched Marianne on 56 count linen. This is white mustard from XJU Design. And I did use the 100.3s for this satin stitch sawtooth border of this cartouche. 2 passes, and I got what I feel are absolutely beautiful satin stitches. I love how it looks. It really jumps off the fabric and gives this piece some dimension. But I know that I will not get the same result using the same thread here on 42 count as I did on 56 count. And so that's why I am going ahead with Soie d'Alger on this piece of fabric. So that's what we're doing. And you can even do 3 passes if you want. And you can also just stick with 1 pass. It's really up to you to decide what kind of coverage, what kind of look you're going for. If you put down 1 layer of satin stitches and you love the look and you're done, you can be done. But if you have put down 2 and you still feel that it's not enough, you can go back with a 3rd if you really want to. Another thing that you can do is you can actually pad your satin stitches. And what you do there is you lay kind of a foundation underneath what will be your visible satin stitches. So in that case, what I would do is I would put 1 layer of satin stitches perpendicular to how they are charted. So if I wanted to put some padding down, I would lay it horizontally rather than vertically. I would lay 1 layer horizontally this way, and that way when I go over it all with my 2 passes of vertical satin stitches, it would be really dense and there would be no seeing any fabric underneath that. But I did not add the padding. I didn't think it was necessary. If I get done with this little section and I feel that it's not adequate, I can always pull this out and try again with padding if I so choose. I don't know that there are a lot of pieces that call for padded satin stitch though. The only one that I can think of off the top of my head is Lucy Barber, and that is a Traditional Stitches exclusive chart. It is also from Hands Across the Sea Samplers, but you can only purchase it at Traditional Stitches. Unfortunately, Traditional Stitches is closing. Janice, the owner, is retiring, but you should be able to find it on the secondary market. Or ask one of your friends. I'm sure somebody you know has it, if they're sampler stitchers. So what I am doing is I am just carefully going over the satin stitches I have already laid. And in doing so, I am catching that tail on the back and securing it. Now you may notice that I am moving in a way that is not necessarily the most efficient for thread usage. You know, I'm burning through a lot of thread here, but this is the technique that I mentioned that will ensure that I have very neat, nicely parallel stitches. And that is to come up on the same side every time and go down on the same side every time. So I'm coming up on the bottom. I don't know why I said it like that, the bottom, but I am coming up on the bottom and going down on the top every time. And while a meandering route would allow, I need to pull that tail back, a meandering route would use less thread. Your satin stitches would end up a little wobbly because whatever the piece was that I first used satin stitches on, that's what I tried to do, and I noticed it just wasn't worth the thread that I was saving. It's, in my opinion, better to just use more thread and get better looking stitches. And that's why we're doing 2 passes. That's why I am on this piece using 2 layers of satin stitches, because I want them to look really nice and fluffy and even. Okay, is that in the right spot? Yes, I think so. So I'm just going slowly, making sure that I am coming up at the right spot every time, going up, or I should say going down at the right spot every time. Now for Margaret Anderson here, I don't know about for other pieces, but you can see that the satin stitch is outlined by a line of cross stitch over 2. I had the option to put the cross stitches down first or the satin stitches down first. I opted to put the cross stitches down first because that way when it came time to do the satin stitches, I wouldn't have to count. That I think is one of the hardest things about satin stitches, is that it is, for me, more difficult to count because you're not jumping over 2 threads and working over squares. You are, well, in this case, and also in the case of Marianne Groom, you might be going up or down in just increments of 1 single thread. And you need to make sure that things are progressing very evenly. I have cross-stitched so much in the last few years, it comes so naturally to me now. But satin stitch is not the same. So that's why I chose to put the cross stitch over 2 down first. Now we're getting into a little bit of a hairy area because this is where the vertical stitches, the vertical satin stitches meet the horizontal satin stitches. So I just need to make sure that I'm getting this all covered. Okay, I do think that that has made a difference, that second pass of satin stitches has made a difference. It looks really thick and shiny. It looks to my eye slightly uneven, but I think that's because it's not a true diagonal. It's stepped almost because we're filling in rectangular areas and we're not filling in the satin stitches diagonally, but it looks very nice. It looks thick. So I'm gonna go ahead with this. All right, so now moving to the horizontal satin stitches, I came up at the right and I'm going down at the left. And so that's what I'm going to continue to do. Now using soie d'Alger has its pros and cons, of course. Pros, it's fat and fluffy, but cons, yeah, I mean, it breaks down more quickly, more easily than some other silks. I really like using 100.3s. It's a tightly spun, tightly twisted, I should say, strong silk, and I get a lot of stitches from beginning to end that are very consistent. Using soie d'Alger, your first few stitches may look a lot different than your last few stitches simply because the nature of the thread changes as you use it. I talked about this in a video that I did about Smyrna crosses. The piece that I stitched for that video used soie d'Alger on 40 count, and I talked about how the integrity of the thread was not holding up, wasn't the same as I got to the end of the thread, of course. And there was one comment that I received that was something like, well, now you know why you shouldn't use soie d'Alger on 40 count, and you should only use it on 36 or lower. And while the commenter had a valid point in that I would probably see more stitches, I would probably get more stitches out of a length of soie d'Alger if I were to use it only on 36 count fabric or lower. I don't think that you should necessarily confine yourself or restrict yourself to using only certain threads on certain fabrics. Like here, for example, this is a weird count fabric that I've ended up with 42 count, and I'm using both soie 103s and soie d'Alger. But I know that there are some stitchers who like to use soie surfine that is thinner than the both of them on a count of fabric that is lower than this, meaning the holes are bigger and you wouldn't really need a thinner thread. But that's what they choose to use because that's what they like. They like the look of it. So it's good to know what the guidelines are out there, what the suggestions might be, but ultimately just use whatever suits you. I do like how this is turning out. This looks nice. All right, we're getting to an area that I had not stitched before, so I need to consult the chart here and make sure that I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. Let me get this stitch in though. Is that right? I don't want to have to do this twice. Let's see. Well, twice. Okay, so I am here. And yes, that looks correct. And then I can move upward. Okay. So the trick here will be remembering where I left off with 2 layers. But I think it'll be noticeable enough. And also I can consult this video, can't I? You can also put in 2 passes as you go. You don't necessarily have to go all 1 layer and then all the second layer. You can do it as you go. So we'll just go ahead and do that. But yeah, there. But that was wrong. That was wrong. See, I'm gonna have to do it twice. And the reason that it was wrong is simply because the satin stitch wasn't covering the area that it should have. I needed to extend it. I started here and went down there, but I actually needed to start here and go down here. This area is a little bit tricky on Margaret Anderson, so if you are stitching her, just beware. Follow the chart. I mean, it is a lot of little lines to look at. And I think actually, like if I don't get it quite right within this band, it's not going to be the end of the world, just as long as the band itself is filled in. Wow, I am not getting that hole that I want. Oh my goodness. You guys ever have this? There we go. That it just refuses to let you in. There we go. Satin stitch doesn't need to be arduous. It doesn't need to be something you should be scared of. Don't shy away from a piece just because it includes satin stitching. You can replace satin stitching with cross stitch over 2. Certainly every satin stitch in this chart can be replaced with cross stitch, but the effect that I am getting with this satin stitch is so beautiful, shiny, and just lustrous that I wouldn't want to replace it with cross stitch over 2. I love cross stitch over 2. I have done so many pieces that are made up of only cross stitch over 2, and they're absolutely beautiful. But satin stitch is a wonderful thing to incorporate to add dimension to a piece, whether it's included in the chart or not. You can always add it if you like it, as I did with Henny Penny. On Henny Penny's apron, I included a bunch of different specialty stitches just because I wanted to, and because I wanted to add some texture to that piece. So something new to try if you haven't already tackled satin stitch. You know, just see how you like it, and give yourself some time and some grace as you are working it out. I would recommend using good lighting, bright natural light if you can, but I know a lot of us have our favorite lights that we have in our stitchy spot. You can use a magnifier if you need to. I do not use one, so I can't recommend one, but I know there are several on the market that a lot of different stitchers use. But yeah, just do what you need to do in order to accomplish this. It doesn't have to be hard or scary. But if you have any questions about anything I've shown in this video, you can leave me a comment here. You can also find me on Instagram at @StitchStitchBead, or send me an email. I will leave my email address in the drop-down box as well. But until next time, happy stitching!